Thank you, Anne and Governor, for joining us today to talk about 5G and education. I'm going to launch straight into the questions. So, Anne, you're working with several universities, including Purdue, University of Missouri, and Connecticut, to name a few, in order to bring 5G to college campuses. Can you tell us why universities are leaning into this now at this particular point in time?
Matt, thanks so much for having me here. It's an honor to be here with you and the governor. So, quite simply, as we think about what has happened in the world over this past year, learning environments have drastically changed, right? And so we now know that we've really got to take a different view in terms of how we think about differentiation and, most critically, innovation. And really the primary driver, I would say, for our engagements with various higher ed institutions across the country is really this passion for innovation, right? We have learned together as a society that the pace of innovation is simply accelerating, right? I mean, none of us could have predicted the impacts of this past year. And, our higher ed institutions and partners and clients are realizing that the role that they're going to play in terms of innovation, what they've got to do to create within their campuses and on their campuses are uniquely differentiated to help accelerate and drive breakthroughs in learnings. What I would also say is that this notion of innovation is really about growth, ultimately economic growth, growth in partnerships, growth in collaboration, and growth in the environment of how they're enabling their students and their faculty to drive progress and success going forward.
Now, obviously, it's been quite a big challenge on all fronts with the pandemic. And no less with education as well. What are the biggest challenges and opportunities when it comes to facilitating 5G learning?
Yeah, so some of the challenges have really been about this realization around the collaboration being critical, right? This is not just simply about tech, right? Tech is intellectually interesting, but if there is not application of human capital and insight and wisdom and iteration, it is really that marriage between and that intersection of people and technology, which 5G will help to unleash, along with edge computing and other types of technologies. I think we've all heard the term that 5G will trigger and bring on the next industrial revolution, and that is something that we at AT&T are incredibly passionate about. We're really excited with our collaboration with the University of Connecticut, the governor here, as well as other other clients and institutions across the country.
Now, Governor, I'd like to bring you in on that point. What Anne mentions about innovation on the University of Connecticut's campus. Obviously, it's a very exciting prospect. I wondered what plans for the technology excites you the most as you think about the student body and the Stanford community and more broadly, the state of Connecticut.
Absolutely, Matt, thank you. And great to be with you. And thank you, AT&T, for looking at UConn Stanford. This is going to be an amazing difference. I'll pick up where Ann left off. I mean, this last year, our world went virtual, and that started with learning, and it started with us getting hundreds of thousands of laptops and Chromebooks out to kids who couldn't go to the classroom for 6 months. And I think that tele-learning, virtual learning is going to be with us forever, and the 5G makes a difference there. And what you're doing with at UConn Stanford is gives us an opportunity to be at the innovative ground floor. I come out of the cable TV world. You guys lapped us. I thought we'd need wire to deliver video for a long time. I sold my company to a wireless company. I gave up. And I see now what 4G did, and I know what 5G can do. And thanks to AT&T and the UConn Stanford collaboration, I think we're going to be innovator entrepreneurs, and AT&T is going to help our instructors, help young people see the full potential of 5G.
Now, what you're doing at UConn is a very unique private-public collaboration. I wondered if you could tell us how this feeds into America's needs around connectivity and the innovation around it.
I think UConn can't do this by itself. Well, we don't have that technology expertise. We get that through a partnership with AT&T, which is helping us take the lead there. So we're going to have one of the very first 5G deployments, and give us a little transponder in so we can provide some free Wi-Fi hotspots in and around Yukon so other people can experiment as well. I just think I have no idea where this is going to go in terms of self-driving cars, in terms of remote surgery. I see what 4G accomplished, and imagine what this can do on steroids. And I'm not the right generation, perhaps, to figure out what that's going to be, but work with AT&T and our young people at Yukon, we're going to have that chance. And Matt, you mentioned the public-private partnership. Well, we have Synchrony that does it a lot in terms of electronic payments. Of course, we have a lot of other finance. We have a lot of digital media, CNBC, WWE. So I see a lot of other collaboration with the private sector to help jumpstart what we're trying to do with 5G in Stanford.
Anne, I'd like to also ask you the same question. How does what AT&T is doing feed into America's needs, do you think? What are things like from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Matt, what I would say is, one of the things that has really come to the forefront over this past year, really around the world, is the importance of connection, right? And AT&T's business is all about creating connection. And we mean that both literally and figuratively, right? We can't even imagine together, just even here, what this would be like, right? What our lives would have been like if we did not have the power of connectivity. One of the things that I like to say, because I feel it to be so true, is I wish early on in the pandemic that we didn't say social distancing, because what we really meant was physical distancing, right? We knew and we realized that now more than ever, we need the power of social connection. We need the power of human connection, and this has really risen to the forefront. So the needs to ensure that connectivity is, accessible, available, by all communities around the country. We've heard discussions about the digital divide. We've heard discussions about the homework gap, right? And learning. Of course, here we're talking with the governor around higher education, but from a K through 12 perspective, right? We have seen communities of color and underserved communities disproportionately be impacted by the lack of access to connectivity. And so the criticality of how we approach solving this and moving forward is really about being better together. Matt, I'm proud to share, some of the audience here may or may not be aware, but AT&T actually has a one-of-a-kind, very unique, groundbreaking public-private partnership with the federal government in service of public safety and our first responders in our FirstNet offerings, right? And so we know that public partnerships in investment in infrastructure, and here with Yukon and the governor and the state around innovation, will be critical to helping us navigate together what this future can be, both for consumers and businesses, and really for all communities. So that's our lens on the role that we play today, the role that we can play, and the really critical nature of public-private partnerships.
Yeah, and sort of feeding into that, I mean, the nature of public partnerships and the critical nature of connectivity. What do you think are the biggest takeaways, both from the PP approach in terms of the benefits and the challenges? And in what way do you think you can apply those lessons at a national or perhaps even a global scale for educational organizations and institutions outside of the US?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll first piggyback off of something that the governor said, right, which is, there is not one entity or one sector that has the monopoly on talent, right? That has the monopoly on intellectual, capital, if you will, right? And so it is so important for us to, let's say, remove the barriers which may exist on, hey, research is only done in a particular way. Innovation and invention is only done in a particular way. As I mentioned earlier, the conception to delivery cycles of solutions, of products, of services, of technologies is significantly compressed, right? And what we have seen is that this cycle of, let's try something, let's see if it's successful. If it's not, we got to try something else, right? That cycle is continuing to accelerate in so many different ways. And so I want to give kudos to, to the governor, because he actually has been one of the great early champions of 5G, right? Really recognizing that the importance to his state and his communities, including the institutions, the educational institutions, is very much foundational, because robust connectivity infrastructure and services are foundational to enabling all that we've talked about across every sector, across every community. And so, we just see some great opportunities together to redefine, healthcare, far beyond telemedicine, but remote patient monitoring, and what are those new use cases that may come to be in terms of pain management, mental health management. Autonomous vehicles, of course, is the one, sort of very cachet, right, application that, that many have talked about over the years because of the characteristics around 5G with increased speeds, improved latency, and mass connectivity. But in order to have autonomous vehicles, right, you've got to have smart cities, right? And you've got to have that infrastructure in place. And so you start seeing this forging of public organizations, agencies, decision makers, innovators with private decision makers, organizations, agencies. And there's no question that 5G is really that intersection that will, I think, really fuse us together. And again, I'm so grateful to the governor and his team and the UConn team, in aggregate, for this opportunity really to showcase what I believe will be one of the key models for future growth.
And Governor, I'd like to bring you in on the same question about the sort of the attractiveness of the public-private approach from your perspective, and whether you think there are lessons that can also be applied for other states and perhaps other decision makers across the globe.
Yeah, look, I'm state government. I don't know how to expand 5G to every corner of the state of Connecticut. I can't do that without AT&T and their peers, but I'll pick up where Ann left off. Look, Connecticut's an amazing state, a lot of small towns, small cities. We're sort of in between Boston and New York City. So 2.5 years ago, Ann, you're right, I was a champion for 5G. I said, I want to make damn sure that everything you can do in Brooklyn, New York, you can do in Brooklyn, Connecticut. And now on the backside of this pandemic, where we have thousands of people moving to Connecticut, they realize they don't have to be in New York City 5 days a week or Boston 5 days a week, but it only works if you're in Willimantic, Connecticut or Bridgeport, Connecticut, if you have a really good high-speed connection so you can stay connected that way. So for me, that's why it's incredibly important that I get 5G distributed throughout our state. And frankly, work with AT&T, one of the first things we did was we made Metro North our first 5G commuter rail, so that those bankers wouldn't have to waste their time on the long route into New York City. Now they can do it from home.
And Anne, as you think about the future of AT&T's workforce, what do you think excites you the most about university students utilizing 5G in their curriculum and with specialized labs like UConn?
Yeah, gosh, there's so many things. I want to reinforce something that the governor just said, because I think this is really at the core of unleashing the potential of 5G, right? Again, what we've learned and experienced has been this detachment between the physical world and the digital world, right? And the fact that we now have to integrate this in a way in every facet of our lives, right? In healthcare and how we handle our financial services and how we manage our homes, right? In our jobs, if you will, right? And so no matter what industry that you're part of. And so this is a big opportunity for the workforce. I mean, as an employer and as a partner who is heavily recruiting from UConn, right? As a fine institution, for me, part of the excitement is we all know that there is a war for talent. We all know that every company is defined by its culture and its people, right? So we have always been passionate about next generation leadership. With an innovation center and with the approach that UConn is taking, we know that they will be building and developing next generation leaders who are learn to be agile, who are tech savvy, who know how to innovate and fail and innovate and fail and innovate and fail and keep going, right? All for success. We know that in a public-private partnership model that their students will be focused on outcomes and impacts, right? Not just the cool research or use cases, but really on what does that innovation do? I think that's also another big power of these kinds of relationships and our collaboration. We'll be able to collaborate with other companies, right, in enabling this next generation of talent to really lead us, right, to lead us in helping make lives better, right, on all fronts for all people. And so there's so many things that excite me about this kind of investment in students, right, in a very systemic way, because this is, the new kinds of immersive experiences, virtual reality, AI, machine learning, data analytics, right? These are all, next generation enablers to all of our futures, right? And organizations and universities like UConn, the governor here is a great leader, will help us pave the way, and together we will make incredible progress together.
Well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. I'd like to thank Anne Chow and Governor Lamont for joining us and contributing to a really interesting discussion. And back to you in Toronto.